Hello, Meoni here, and this is a video about 5 things that I would love to come across from World of Warcraft to actually enhance and make Final Fantasy XIV better. These are by no means the only 5 choices that you could choose from, but these are just 5 in particular that I wanted to grab straight out of that game and go, you know what, this would improve my own experience in 14. So the first one is mount variants. This is again something very minor to a lot of people, but the variety of mounts on offer in Final Fantasy XIV is great. We have, for example, lots of different colored bird mount from those Heavensward trial fights, but what we don't have is that across the board. There are plenty of easy ways to get mounts, but World of Warcraft has proved by basically giving you different color variants or different texture variants or different saddles on the back of the same mount, essentially, just repackaged and re-released. Now, this is something that maybe Final Fantasy doesn't want to do, just plainly based on the idea that they can go with uniquity as the main attraction to that mount, but I really personally like the idea of having the same sort of mount obtained from different places. So like the black one is the rarest because it comes from a very rare drop from a boss, so you have to go grind for that. Or like the red one is accessible from this particular fight, but only for these set people who do these certain things in a certain order, or achievement rewards, or from PvP. It would be a great way of unlocking a lot of the primary content mounts for a lot of other people, for a lot of other entrants for that audience. So we have things like the PvP mounts that would be a great example of things I would like to see in PvE as well, especially in some instances where some of those mounts in PvP from the numbered season feast rewards for the top 100 players, it would be nice to see different variants of those obtainable from the PvE fights that a lot of them are actually based upon. It's no lie that I'm still a slight bit salty about Aulus's chair that you can see, which is from obviously Alamigo if you've ever done that dungeon. It is a floating Magitek chair, and of course there is no way of getting a PvE version of this, even though people who enjoy the PvE would love to have a variant of it. Now, PvP always has multiple different colors of a mount. Say for instance 2 seasons go by, usually they'll have one reward and it'll have a black version and then maybe a gold version or whatever like that. They recolor those mounts and reissue them as separate rewards, so you can identify people who took part in seasons apart from each other and who have got in those select few spaces. I don't believe that's taking away the uniquity if we make those more variable across the board, give people more mounts to collect, and ultimately I think people would actually enjoy collecting them all, or at least trying to collect something in each of those categories. It's something in World of Warcraft that I love to do, where I went around and I perhaps couldn't get one version of a mount, but I could get another version of it. But I still looked up to those people who did go and clear the hardest content to get that certain colored version of it, or that evolved version. Always very exciting to see. My second point then, for the second thing I would like to come from WoW, is just straight up the Glamour System they have, the transmogrification. So the way that works in that game is you find a piece of leather armor that you can equip, it instantly gets recognized and its image saved into that transmog system. Even if you throw that piece of leather chest armor away and never use it again, if your class could use it and you had it in your inventory, you would have registered that particular image. So that obviously means that storage is a thing of the past. So if we go to the actual transmogrification system, these transmog vendors, these ethereals, they will allow you to select through all of those pieces of gear that you have collected over the many years you've been playing the game, no matter what content comes out. If you've actually had it in your inventory or equipped it in some cases, then it should be on here for you to pick and choose from, making it so that you can easily mix and match all of those sets together to make something that looks absolutely awesome. And of course, like I said, this means this would be a way of reducing the amount of items needed to actually store, because you don't need to use them. After content has become old, or we've moved on to another expansion or another level bracket, obviously that gear loses its appeal with stats. So basically what I'm saying is, in 14, if we could have the Glamour system and the Glamour dresser, but instead of the way it is currently, just completely delete the part where we have the whole storage component and the ability to retrieve it, and just have straight up image storage, that would be much better. Because if people do want to actually store a piece of actual gear for whatever nostalgic reason, then that should be an option to store in your retainer regardless. But I think the majority of people playing 14 would actually like a similar system to this, so they can just store everything they ever set their eyes on, and then that opens up even more of a collection process for people to go around every single dungeon and try and collect and catch them all, if you want to call it that. That addictive characteristic would be really beneficial and make Glamour even more of an endgame than it already is. So my third point then is the pet battle system. This is something I've talked about before. Lord of the Minion in Final Fantasy XIV is not something I particularly enjoy. I don't think there's really enough depth there. It is not my cup of tea. It's kind of like this sort of MOBA thing. It's a bit slow. Not many people actually go and play it, so a lot of the time you're playing with bots. The tournaments are kind of meh. The rewards are meh at the end of the day. It's nothing too special in my opinion. If we had a pet battle system like in World of Warcraft, which is very much akin to how Pokemon would do it, where you have, you know, a challenger in the wild, an NPC, you challenge them to a minion battle, and you had like several abilities to choose from. They could literally port those straight from Lord of the Minion, and you could just press each of those like 4 buttons, and then it's basically rock, paper, scissors at the end of the day with those particular boss fights. And then, you know, you could have the chance collecting that person's minion. They could have lots of different NPCs with rare minions that could be used in battle, and if you beat them, you can actually gain them yourself. So very much like the Pokemon system. And it also brings up the idea of maybe the ability to actually tame monsters in the wild, or at least small critters in the world that they could introduce, and have those minions collectible like that. This could be a really good system for 14. It works in World of Warcraft. It's quite fun in that game. Quite addictive. A lot of people do actually actively enjoy that, but it would really make Final Fantasy XIV, which in my opinion has a better pet system in general for collection, it would really flesh that out, which I don't think Lord of the Minion actually does. So my fourth point would be challenge modes with limited time rewards. This is something I absolutely adored back in Mists of Pandaria. I took place in World of Warcraft in that particular challenge mode season, and it was absolutely glorious. Out of that, we got a number of coloured mounts, like a phoenix mount, and we also got a beautiful piece of transmog armor. These were cosmetic rewards, but it was really fun to do some small, 5-player content in that game. It would be 4-player in our game if we were to have something like that. It's great. The last time we had a small-time hard mode challenge was something like Rathalos Extreme in our game, which was absolutely amazing. I was hoping that we would hear news on another collaboration with Monster Hunter or any other IP of a similar sort of nature, so we could actually fight one of these bosses from another game or whatever, really, and have a bit of a challenge, something that kind of throws a spanner in the works, something different, and really sort of give you an idea of how cool it would be to have savage modes for 4 players only. This is something that Yoshi P has talked about in the past, having small player-based content with high difficulty, and hopefully they follow through in the next couple of years, because it is probably one of my favorite parts of content in a game, and I severely miss it from World of Warcraft. Timed runs of dungeons with the minimum item level would be incredible for some cosmetic rewards, and it would sort of open up that sort of esports for PvE like World of Warcraft has, which I personally would all be completely behind for a game as good as 14. So the last point on my list, number 5, is actually phasing to help tell storylines such as battles, etc. That's the thing I wrote here as a bullet point on my notepad to remember what I was going to talk about. Specifically, when I talk about phasing, I mean things like when you are introduced to memories of the past. So if you create a Death Knight on World of Warcraft, you have this starting area which is all set in the past. And the way they do this is quite advanced phasing. So there are points in the game, in sort of like a point in space-time, that exists that no one else can interact with if they are past that point. So for example, another player of a different class that isn't a Death Knight walks through that particular area in the game, they will not see the other players. They are completely invisible. But in the Death Knight's playthrough, they are playing through the past, they're seeing the Lich King, they're seeing that entire story unfold until that storyline ends, and then you fast forward to present day. So it allows for storytelling for certain situations and uses quests as triggers to actually know what part of a storyline you are part of. Imagine if we were to walk around Eorzea and have the ability to go back to the Cartano Flats and experience that war in a quest line, but without the need for instancing. We could see how it actually was and tell a little story on the actual battlefield, and then straight away have people normally questing through that zone, or, you know, in Thanalan, for example, whilst we're in a completely different time zone. It's really quite interesting tech. I'm not sure it's possible with Final Fantasy XIV's engine, with all of the excuses we usually get, because it is basically based on 1.0's original engine, so it's a horribly messy, buggy thing, but it would be really cool anyway, and that's one of the top things that I would want that's probably completely impossible on this list, is phasing. But I think it would add to the storytelling and really sort of embellish those characters and be able to have proper flashbacks, because how Final Fantasy XIV does it at the moment is they spend quite a bit of their budget to create an instance, or, you know, tell a separate story of that character's past by having a dungeon or a small instance, a duty of telling that story or something like that, which obviously requires extra asset, and this would negate that cost entirely for the most part, or at least it would be a cheaper option. But either way, I think those are my top 5 things that I personally would want from World of Warcraft. I know this is a bit of a niche video because, you know, why is it World of Warcraft? But World of Warcraft, for the most part, took up the majority of my time. My gaming time of my childhood turned into adulthood. Basically, it filled that sort of 10-year gap. And I think it's important to see what other games are doing and see how you could actually improve our game based on their successes or failures. So let me know what things you would like, the top 5 things from a game of your choice below, and we might look at those in future videos. Thank you all kindly for watching, and I'll see you all next time.